Now, I made several videos before about pet food, but this time I'm going to give a little bit of a brief history and then have you have some things that you can tangibly write down to look at your dog food bag and decide whether your food measures up or if there's things in there that you didn't know were there and you don't want them there. So we're going to go as quick as we can. First of all, I just want to give you a quick history. Pet food originated in about World War II, about that time. And basically it started with a lot of the grain and cereal companies, and they got the idea that, hey, we can make biscuits, we can make food like this for dogs. And so they started making dog food. And a lot of the stuff that they were using was rejected by the human market, so therefore they thought, well, instead of wasting it, why don't we make it into pet food? So that's kind of how it got its start. Now, it's barely, if you think about it, it's a new industry, okay? It's not really been around that long, strangely enough. And then what they started to do is say, hey, let's add some meats so that these dogs and cats aren't undernourished. And a lot of that meat that they put in there was not what we would hope, was not USDA approved. Again, it wasn't approved for the human markets. They thought, well, let's put it in pet food. The only problem about that is that some of those animals that are in that meat are what I call the 5 Ds, and that is either dead, diseased, dying, disabled, or drugged. And that has not changed a whole lot in the pet industry. So keep that in your mind as we're going through this. So basically anything that's not approved for human consumption and it's a meat waste or byproduct ends up on the floor of the rendering place where they're butchering animals. So that's what we're talking about. And the reason they may be drugged is because maybe before they died, if they were ill, they might have had some antibiotics that were in them, and that does stay in the pet for a while, or not the pet, but the animal. It stays in there for a while. So we think, my gosh, surely things have changed in all these years. And like I said, really not that much. A lot of times you'll see a meat source or a protein source in a food and you'll assume, oh, that's all like muscle meat. But a lot of times you'll find that in there will be ground up bone, which isn't always bad. Heads of the animals, feathers, duck bills have been known to be put in food. So even though you hear about these exotic, pet foods with duck and salmon and all this stuff, you really want to find out what's in it. What part of the animal's in it. Grains, the only problem is that they're still in our foods and they're very, very prominent. But the bad news is we've been using pesticides more and more and more since World War II when pet foods began. And we've got a lot more genetically modified foods, so GMOs. A lot of those end up acting as phytoestrogens in the body, so they throw off the hormones of your pet, they throw off the thyroid. Lots of different things are guided by the thyroid and the hormones. So basically, our pets, believe it or not, have the genetic potential to live to between 15 and 20 years old. And that may shock you, but the truth is most of our dogs die between the age of 10 and 15, if we're really, really lucky. Maybe some of the breeds a little more, but they should go well into their 20s. And when I started learning about dog food, it was because of a dog that I got to know that my friend had that was 23 years old. And I was asking her, what are you doing different? And so she gave me a lot of books about pet nutrition, which began my interest. Although I've been in pet nutrition for 20 years, pet nutrition from the standpoint of being a dog label geek and somebody who just loves to look at dog food labels, that's where that began. I'll grab a pen if you have one, because right now I'm just going to give you a couple things that you want to look for as a criteria of choosing a food. So one of those things would be, first of all, don't choose by the bag. How cute the bag is, how pretty it is, how good the marketing is on TV. A lot of us go out and buy food because we've seen a really sharp TV commercial or something. Trust me, some of the worst foods are the ones that are on TV on the commercials, okay? So what you should not have in your food, number one, would be any kind of corn, any kind of wheat, any kind of soil, cereal grains. A lot of times what they're doing now in pet foods, and I want to give you this heads up because you're going to see it more and more and more, into any store, start looking at dog food labels, and you'll see what I'm talking about. You're going to see more and more of things like peas, pea fiber, pea flour, chickpeas, soy, yellow beans, beans. Basically legumes. So what they're doing is they're putting legumes into pet food and taking away more of the meat source. And so you've got sometimes 5 or 6 ingredients that are legumes, which aren't even species appropriate for our pets, whether that be a dog or a cat, even some of our other exotics and things like that. So get that in your head when you think about this. And one of the things that you want to be sure is that when you see that, you're understanding that, sure, the first source may be meat on that label, but if you combined all those legumes that are in there, that actually ends up being the major ingredient in that food, okay? So about 5 or 6 years old is when we start considering our dogs senior dogs. And that's really sad because they really shouldn't be at that point. Now, from somebody who has experience with dog nutrition and foods that are species appropriate for years, I've seen dogs even at 12 years old running like puppies. So I know that they can be very active, very healthy up into their senior years. But a lot of the problems that are happening is the additives, the preservatives, the GMOs, the starches, all really start causing the kidneys to fail in our pets. And so you see a lot of overtaxing of the kidneys, the pancreas, and things like that, which they ultimately die of in the end from these low quality protein sources. So corn is the number one, just never, ever in any way. And it might be categorized by different names. But basically, remember, it's one of the biggest allergy producers. Instead of using drugs to treat those allergies, change the diet. So some of the things that corn may be disguised as on dog foods is corn gluten meal, ground yellow corn, whole grain corn, ground whole wheat could be in there as well, and also corn, sorghum, wheat flour, other things like that. So add to this list a couple things of the latest that you want to look for that you don't want to see in there again is the soy and the chickpeas and any kinds of pea and those kind of things, and beans. If I see one pea source, I don't flip out. That's fine. And I have seen that in one of the foods that I actually use. But it's when you see many, especially when they're towards the beginning of the list of the ingredients in that food, that's when you really have to watch. Now, meat should be the number one source, as we've said before. Sometimes the byproducts that are in the foods as protein sources could be intestines. They could be chicken heads. They could be fish heads, duck bills, like we talked about before, chicken and turkey fat, hides, feathers, bone, and rendered meat basically is where a lot of the meat in our dog foods is coming from. The other thing that you want to think about is your preservatives, and there's ones that are very typical. BHA has become very well known, and BHT as causing liver and kidney dysfunction, and also known carcinogens, so you just want to stay away from those. And also ethoxyquin, and that's used as a rubber stabilizer. I'm not sure why it's in there, but a lot of these preservatives are in there because these dog foods in general sit on the shelf in a dog food store for a long time. And as I was doing research for this video, I talked to somebody who was in the pet industry as far as food and a distributor of your large commercial foods. And he watched with his own eyes shipments of dog food in tractor trailers for months and months without climate control, in warehouses with no climate control. Can you imagine what the heat gets to inside a metal truck container? And if it's in there and then sitting on the dog food shelf in your store and then you're buying it, and we've seen it, it's carried itself out with all the dog food toxicities. So they do this so they can mass produce. So if you're looking for dog food, you want to find one that is produced in small quantities, small batches, so that they're not sitting around, they're in temperature controlled conditions, and when you get them right to your door, and they've been made within the last week or so. So it's really fresh, and the dogs get more out of it that way, the fresher they are. Also, there's some fillers that have come up that have been real popular. One I see all the time is yucca, and it causes diarrhea. So if your dog all of a sudden starts having diarrhea or GI problems, and you're on the same food you've been on for a long time and you haven't looked at the label, go look at the label and check, compare it to an old one, and just look for some of these ingredients. And maybe that is what causes the problems that you're seeing. They're just popping up because they don't tell the consumer when they change the ingredients. Another thing I've seen a lot of is sugar and corn syrups, artificial flavors, artificial colors, which dogs can also be very allergic to. They do this just to keep the color consistent on the food. Animal fat, a lot of times, is in foods. That can be in the form of lard and also discarded restaurant grease. So be very careful when you see that. The guaranteed analysis is what most people look for when they look at a dog food bag. They pull the bag out, they look at the guaranteed analysis. Here's the protein, here's the fat, here's the moisture, and then they go from there. Oh, that's good, that's good, that's good. But that's just the minimum the AAFCO requires dog food to have. So that it's just telling you they've got the minimum. But let's look then, more importantly, at the ingredients. That's what I hop to. I glance at the guarantee analysis and I go right to the ingredients because I want to know where they're sourced from too. So that's not enough just to use the analysis there. And also don't go to Dog Food Advisor. That's one guy's opinion. So don't use it. Everybody uses that. It's one guy's opinion. The intangibles that you may not know and you can research about a food, especially if it's from a private company formulated by a veterinarian or veterinarians. Where was it made? You want to make sure it was made in the USA. What was the facility? What kind of quality control did they have? Where did the ingredients come from? How old is the food when I bought it? And who can answer these questions? Obviously, we know that vets aren't very good at canine nutrition. We see it in the science diet foods that end up on their shelves, that end up in the bottom of the list, sometimes at the dog food symposium. So they are not always the best source. Pet stores are not. Those are usually just employees. They don't necessarily have a lot of scientific interest or knowledge about the ingredients of pet food. And then sometimes a breeder, yes, some breeders do. Some breeders don't know a lot about nutrition. They just use whatever somebody told them they used. So they're not always the best person, but holistic veterinarians, especially if a food has been developed and formulated by a holistic veterinarian, that's a good place to get your information from. So what makes a difference in Life's Abundance food, which is one that I recommend, is that I know where all the ingredients are coming from. Number one, there's fish meal, there's chicken meal, there's carrots, apples, celery, brown rice, flaxseed meal, alfalfa, spinach. These are all food or plant-based minerals. We don't want synthetic minerals and vitamins added to your food. You want them to be in a plant-based form and a dietary form. Also, I look for something with probiotics. Life's Abundance is one of the first foods to ever use probiotics, helping your dog get more out of their food. Also, prebiotics, antioxidants, very, very strong antioxidants in their foods. And they're one of the only companies that can guarantee that when you get the probiotic in the food that it's actually live. Other ones, by the time you get it, the probiotic's dead. Also, chelated minerals are very, very important because they're better assimilated into the body. And also just realize that as we are trying to do, consumers are becoming more educated. And if we become more educated, we can put more pressure on these dog food companies to stop adding these cheap ingredients that are costing us a lot of money when we go to the veterinarian over and over and over for these issues. Some of the bonuses, again, with Life's Abundance is they're made in small batches. There's home delivery. You can get up to 20% off your order if you go on their auto ship program, which makes sense to me. Who wants to lug heavy bags, right? It also eliminates the middleman, so it keeps the price lower for really high quality food. You feed less of it, it's more nutrient dense, and also there's less waste. So that's just a little bit. I wanted to tell you about the history and dog foods. Go look at your dog food bag, go to dog food stores, look and see what I'm seeing. I think you'll be really shocked to see what you find. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you've liked it, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks so much for hanging with me today and have a great day. And here's the good nutrition for you and your dog.